Welcome to the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council with hosts Grace Evans and Moses Brattrud. Stay informed on the top stories on life, family, and religious freedom. Get the facts, stand for truth. Hello and welcome back to the Family Beacon podcast. My name is Grace Evans. I'm here with Moses Brattrud. If you're watching on YouTube, I want you to go ahead and take a look at Moses' hair and my hair. And I want you to take a guess to see how long it will be before I get my first white hair. Because Moses is definitely graying right now, you guys, and it's very obvious.
That's so true. I even actually just the past month I've noticed that my beard hairs are now starting to go gray, which is disappointing. I'm only 30 years old. I love my hair color, and I wanted many more years being comfortable with my hair color.
But how do you actually feel, Moses? Does it make you feel good? Because I honestly, people always think I'm like 14 years old. Like they just do. And I feel like once I have some white hair, some gray hair, they'll be like, oh, like older, wiser, respect. I don't know. Do you actually feel sad about it, or are you just putting out a show for the camera?
No, I do a little bit. Yeah.
Really?
I mean, if it was all brown, I don't think people would treat me differently.
Okay. You don't feel like you have like the older going on?
Well, I think I look older without my hair being taken into account. That's the thing. So I don't worry too much about that. No. What an interesting way to begin this podcast.
Anyways, his hair was like plastered down before we started, and I was like, Moses, maybe don't have your hair plastered to your face. And then he did this, so this is where we're at, folks.
Yeah, it's quite elevated right now.
Your favorite host, right? I want to give you a quick rundown on what we're going to be talking about in this podcast episode. We have a very special announcement from our annual dinner speaker, so I'll be rolling that in this episode. We're also going to be giving you a recap of the 2022 legislative session here in Minnesota, what key issues we saw, and what MFC's role was at the Capitol. We'll also be talking about some sexual education that's going on in Buffalo, Minnesota, that we oppose, as well as hearing from our videographer, Jack Bittner, on a short film he has just released, which is incredible. So those are the things we'll be talking about this week on the Family Beacon podcast. Moses, let's go ahead and roll a very special clip of our keynote speaker, Kayleigh McEnany. Did I say it right?
I think that's how we say it.
Okay, we just had a conversation about this. We're going to go ahead and roll a clip from her that she sent over to us, just telling you guys why you should sign up for our annual dinner on June 17th. Jack, let's go ahead and roll it.
Hey everyone, I am so excited to come to Bloomington, Minnesota on June 17th for the Minnesota Family Council's annual dinner. What it takes is the theme this year. Get your tickets now. They are selling out fast. You can get your tickets at mfc.org/AD2022. It's going to be a wonderful night. We are going to talk about what it takes to prioritize family and faith in these challenging times. It will be a wonderful evening there in Bloomington, Minnesota. Minnesota Family Council, join me as we have an unforgettable evening, and we talk about what it takes to accomplish God's purpose for your life and for Minnesota.
Okay, so as you just heard from Kayleigh, this is going to be an incredible opportunity. I mean, her faith was truly tested in her time at the White House. She was the White House press secretary during one of the most controversial, polarizing times to be a White House press secretary during the Donald Trump administration. And you know what? She received so much fire, so much flack, so
during
many
COVID.
Nasty reporters, honestly, just throwing insults at her, not respecting her in the newsroom, and she just did an incredible job. I mean, and her faith was truly tested, but she just came out the other side a stronger Christian, and she's going to share more about her testimony at the annual dinner. She's also a mom, which I love to see it. I think I saw somewhere that she's actually pregnant with baby number 2.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah, my mom was telling me that, so that's super exciting. But so she's just an incredible witness, I think, for excellence, but not only excellence for Christ. And so I'm pumped to meet her, honestly. I'm pumped to hear what she has to say. You know, we have so many things coming up in Minnesota that we're just going to be pressing down on, just continuing to fight this culture war. And I think she's really going to inspire us in what it takes to win that culture war. Right, Moses?
Absolutely. So I think it's important to know that at this time, we're releasing this podcast on Friday, June 2nd, and there's just a few more days to get tickets to the annual dinner, especially if you want to get our lowest price. We're coming up on that annual dinner on June 17th at the DoubleTree by Hilton in Bloomington with Kayleigh McEnany, as we've been discussing. And I just really urge you to don't sleep on this. Get tickets now, put it on your calendar, and then you'll be all set to go. So we're so excited about this. The response has been great, and can't wait to see so many of you there in person.
Yeah, go to mfc.org/AD2022 to get your tickets now. Again, don't wait. We have sold out in the past. We don't want you guys to miss getting a seat, and we'll have it on the screen right here, as well as linked in the description box below. I want to move on, though, and just give our audience a recap of what went down in the 2022 session, because I think there were just so many issues. It was honestly kind of hard to track for me because there was so much going on, and I feel like at the same time, there wasn't enough going on with the life issue, and that's kind of what I want to talk about first. Yeah. That's something that was kind of frustrating to me because, I mean, this is a huge year for the pro-life movement, right? Yeah. And so you would think in the Minnesota legislature, that would be on everyone's mind, and that would be what everyone's trying to push for, whether you're against abortion or whether you're for abortion. Now, I think that there were several pro-abortion bills that were defeated, which is a good thing, and I want you to tell us about those. But I feel like there wasn't, maybe you can tell us more, Moses, were there any life bills that were almost passed that people pushed in favor of innocent children, or was it more so the opposition pushing their bills and then us defeating it?
You know, there was a lot of give and take. I would say that pro-abortion people and pro-life people both put forward bills. To your point, was there the energy that we want to see for life in Minnesota? I would say generally not, and I'm not blaming any of our amazing pro-life legislators for that. The fact is that with a divided legislature, when legislation has to pass a Republican Senate and a Democratic House to get to the governor's desk, there's just less legislation getting to the governor's desk, period. And that's especially true when it comes to some of these social issues. And I hate to say that abortion is divisive because everyone should affirm that this is a horrendous, grotesque act, but it is divisive. And there are people, especially in the Democratic Party in the Minnesota legislature, who feel differently about it than we do. And unfortunately, one of the bills that we saw, I think it was called the Patients' Rights Protection Act or something along those lines. I'll pull up the title for you here, but it's a really nasty bill. It's basically so Roe v. Wade, as you know, invented a right to privacy in the U.S. Constitution. Well, in Minnesota, we have our own version of Roe v. Wade, as we've talked about on the podcast, Doe v. Gomez, and that does the same thing in that it invents a right to abortion in the Minnesota state constitution. And so this essentially, and just like at the federal level, well, Roe v. Wade was always just a court case. It was never a federal law, right? It was never on the statute books. And it's the same in Minnesota. So pro-abortion legislators want to say there's a right to privacy, which is construed to mean a right to an abortion, which anyone can have access to. And that bill would also kill all of Minnesota's pro-life laws that we do have, like the 24-hour waiting period, the woman's right to know when women have to receive certain information to help them understand the decision that they're making. So that would have been a really bad bill. We're really grateful that was defeated. When it was brought up in the Minnesota Senate, I believe that it was defeated 32-30. Wow. Senator Sandy Pappas was the legislator who brought it up from St. Paul, and she's a really strong on abortion rights, unfortunately. She used to be my senator when I lived up by the cathedral in St. Paul. So I'm a bit glad to be out of that neighborhood sometimes because I was unfortunately... I did communicate with her a little bit.
Did you?
I just sent her some personal messages. I never got a response.
Okay.
Just as her constituent.
Wow.
And I said, Senator, I really... I understand you've been doing this for a long time, but an old dog can learn new tricks. I didn't call her dog. I'm saying you really, it's not too late for you to honor life at every stage. So anyway, that responded. She did not respond.
Okay.
So that was the biggest bad abortion bill, and I believe that was pushed for a vote. It's been introduced many times. I was telling someone yesterday, with the legislature, it's always the same thing year after year, and if no action is taken on it, you best believe it'll be back next year. Like, we're not going to talk about marijuana today necessarily, but marijuana, it comes up every year, and there's a hearing on it, or there's not a hearing on it, but there's always murmurings around the hallways about marijuana and some of these other issues as well.
So you told us about the biggest threat to life that was brought up, and thankfully it was defeated.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the biggest, the best legislation that was put forward for life, for women and children, and why that was defeated and when that was defeated?
Yeah, so we're really grateful for Representative Lisa DeMuth, and she introduced 2 bills, and these are really just good common sense bills. And the reason she introduced these particular bills, I believe, is because they're particularly not divisive. Like, they're not. She hoped, I think, to get pro abortion people to sign on to them, because they're and just try to bring people together and pass legislation that would make positive change. So the first one was to make sure that abortion facilities are licensed in Minnesota and inspected. So they're not currently being inspected or licensed. And it occurs to me that you have to be licensed to be a hairstylist in Minnesota, but there are but an abortion clinic is essentially not even treated like a medical clinic and not inspected. And I think that's a gross, first of all, because abortion is dangerous. That's really bad. So that's one of Representative DeMuth's bills. The other one would have prevented family planning grant money to going to abortion providers or groups that refer to abortion providers. So those are some, you can say that this is not the most exciting stuff, like not the most exciting legislation, but I think this is really important. This is how we lay the groundwork for a pro-life future in Minnesota. We can move quickly or we can move slowly, depending on where we're at, on what we're able to do. But the important thing is that we move forward every legislative session and every election towards the cause of life.
That's good. Can you tell us why that bill specifically, though, was defeated, and when it was defeated? Was it defeated in the House or was it defeated in the Senate? That
was defeated in the House, and it was ruled not germane. Because I think that the bill was offered as an amendment to an amendment, which is a process in the House that, we're gonna have to have our Assistant Policy Director Becca Delahunt back on to talk a little bit more about the legislative process in terms of what that means. But essentially, it was ruled as being not relevant to the bill at hand. So it's a defeat, but it doesn't mean that the bill is dead. The bill can come back next year.
Yep, that makes sense.
Yep.
Thanks for that rundown, Moses. I think that's really important for our audience just to understand what key bills were brought up on the life issue, because that really is on the forefront of all of our minds right now. And like you say, these things are going to come up again and again, and we're going to want to know what our chances are and what specifically is in the bill. And we'll be keeping you updated, of course, the next session, what goes down. Speaking of life, can you tell us what went down with physician-assisted suicide this session? Were people in favor of it? Were people against it? I'm guessing people on both sides yet again. But give us the highlights. Give us what people were pushing for.
So that's an interesting one. It's one that we pay attention to every session, but I'm happy to report that this year it did not get a hearing or a vote. The reason we talk about it, though, is because it's a live bill. It was introduced last year, but it's still live during this biennium, the 2-year the legislators sit for 2 years between elections. And so it was still a live bill. It could have been taken up for a hearing at any time, is my understanding. Thankfully, it was not. And that's especially, we're really grateful for that, because we understand that Compassion and Choices, which is the large group that advocates for physician-assisted suicide around the country, that they're really targeting Minnesota. They see Minnesota as a state where they can practice their nasty art here, and so we don't want that to happen. We're fighting hard to keep that from happening, and I'm grateful to say that it did not even come up for a vote, and there has been bipartisan opposition to this, so we hope to see that continue as well.
That's honestly really good to hear, Moses, because with everything going down with abortion, potentially overturning Roe, which that is, of course, our hope. I just keep thinking about physician-assisted suicide also because there's so many people on the pro-abortion side that keep advocating for abortion up until birth, and sometimes even argue for abortion after birth. And at that point, it's not even abortion, that's infanticide. But I hear them making these arguments or saying they're not sure if they would support infanticide. And I see those gears turning in their heads as they're asked those questions, as there's street interviews being conducted by different pro-life organizations. And I just think, okay, if our culture can't draw the line here, if you can't even draw the line after children are outside the womb, I mean, it's terrible enough that you can't see that a child within the womb it's a preborn child worthy of our love and protection. But if you can't draw the line after the birth canal even, I mean, what is there left for us to do but for people to begin to advocate and continue to advocate for physician-assisted suicide? I mean, it's going to become more and more common. There are people that are already advocating for this, of course, but I just think in the next few years, that's something we really are going to have to be watching, Moses. I mean, even if Roe is overturned, physician-assisted suicide is something that's going to continue. It's going to be increasingly coming up because if you don't value life at such a young age, there's no way that we're going to value life at an older age.
Yep.
I mean, it's going to be, people are going to continue to press for terminating those who are disabled, those who are helpless and are more, they're not able to defend themselves. That's why it's so easy to make the preborn a target, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a really important issue for us to be tracking because we're going to need to protect life from womb to tomb. We say that a lot. And we really mean that, right?
Absolutely.
Like this is one of our key issues. Yep. Even if this wasn't specifically brought up this session, we're always watching. We're always keeping our eyes on this.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, but we can say with almost 100% certainty that we have not seen the last of it, that it will be back, and we'll have to fight another day.
Speaking of women's rights, though, right, Moses?
Mm-hmm.
We're hearing that phrase thrown around so much right now. Tell us about the so-called Equal Rights Amendment. We've seen it rear its ugly head in Minnesota. We've seen it rear its ugly head on the national level, but it's here in Minnesota, right? So tell us about it.
Yeah, so the ERA, it's something that if you've been following politics for a while, you've probably heard of it because it dates back to the 1970s. And the idea was that we should add an amendment to the U.S. Constitution saying that there shall be no discrimination on the basis of sex. And back then, that meant men and women, which were the only two sexes.
But we can't define what it means to be women anymore, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, we don't know what women are.
Have to be a biologist.
Right.
So, so then, what would have needed to happen would be that 2/3 of states would have had to ratify it by popular vote, I think. I hope I'm not getting my constitutional law wrong there. So that did not happen.
Careful, our attorney will come for you.
Yeah, exactly. Renee
will listen to the episode and she'll give us the eyebrow raise.
She'll issue a correction, but I know that didn't happen in the sense that I know that this failed to be added to the U.S. Constitution, but it's been around in various states, and various states have added it to their constitutions. Minnesota is not one of them, but now for the last few years, there have been people who have been trying to change that. But the thing that they've changed, Grace, is that they no longer talk about sex.
Oh.
Because that word is verboten anymore. You cannot use it. There's no such thing as biological sex. There is only, quote unquote, gender assigned at birth, right? And so the word gender is used. So there shall be no discrimination on the basis of gender. And there's two big problems that we have with that. The first problem is that gender has no definition in Minnesota state law. Because it is a made-up word. I mean, not made up in the sense of completely invented, but nobody thought of that humans had gender until the 1960s. Biological sex was the term that was used, and gender referred to language in the sense of like she is the feminine gender and he is the masculine gender when you're talking about linguistics. But it was these crazy French philosophers who were like, all humans have a gender, and there's a gender spectrum, and all that stuff. So we have a problem with that because gender is not defined in state law. And what we could see from this is men saying, well, you can't discriminate me based on my gender, so I have to have access to women's bathrooms, women's changing facilities, women-only spaces of all types, sports teams, homeless shelters, whatever it is. And all of these have been legal issues in Minnesota and in other states already. So we no doubt see more of that. And the other one is because, and we know this will be true, this is not speculation, but in other states that have an ERA, like New Jersey, it becomes an ironclad quote unquote right to taxpayer supported abortion, because it's supposed to be gender-based discrimination if you can't get a taxpayer-funded abortion when you want one. And obviously that's absurd, but more gender craziness and more taxpayer-funded abortions, those are, in short, the two reasons why we oppose the ERA.
Under the ERA, I'm reading from some research that I did a few years ago, women could be required to register for the military draft and serve in the military, which, I mean, that was almost made mandatory across the nation, which thankfully it wasn't. The ERA could also require men and women to compete for inclusion on the same sports team, like you mentioned, and male and female prisons could become integrated, which would be a huge disaster, and then women would be required to be disciplined the same way as men. It would also jeopardize privacy and safety for women within bathrooms, locker rooms, nursing homes, etc. Which this would not benefit women at all. It would remove protections for women, right? It would erase the safe spaces that there are for women in our society. And so that's a really good breakdown of why we oppose the Equal Rights Amendment, in air quotes, right? We call it the so-called Equal Rights Amendment because it's not really about equal rights, right?
No, it is not.
It's about stripping away the rights of women and ensuring that there will be no safe spaces for us. So, Moses, tell us what went down with the ERA, though, this session specifically.
Yeah, so this session, it did come up for a vote, and it was defeated in the Minnesota Senate, and we're glad to hear that. And so I'm going to fast forward a little bit, Grace, because there's a lot of legislative issues that we could talk about. The big ticket items just did not get done. The Minnesota legislature went home without a ton of bills being passed. I don't think there was agreement on a public safety bill. There's talk now at the moment we're recording this. There's talk of a special session, so we could see some more action on some of those bigger bills where they spend taxpayer money to do fancy things like bridges and stuff. But we'll keep you posted if that happens. I'm hopeful that if that some of these really nasty bills that are also kind of smaller, that they would not come up during a special session, because usually there are bigger fish to fry. So I wanted to provide that update to our listeners, because we're trying to the Minnesota legislature has a lot going on, and yet sometimes it seems like there's it sometimes seems like they don't get much done. But I just wanted to give you a brief update on that. Now, Grace, I want to talk about a story that we've been following this week out of Buffalo, Minnesota. Yeah. And this is a school district that has been in the news in the past few years over women's sports. But this is a new thing. Now we're seeing a high school curriculum that may be telling us some weird things about gender. Yes,
let's talk about that. Yeah. So our friends at Alpha News reported on this. We will have the article linked in the description so you can read it in full. But this is them reporting. Recently, some students or some parents of some high school students at Buffalo High School here in Minnesota forwarded an email to Alpha News giving them a tip of what was going on. And this email was regarding 10th grade students and what they could be expected to learn from a summer sex education class at the public school. And that class actually began today, June 1st. So this is a summer session. They forwarded this email because they were concerned about the content that it included and what it was talking about. It was laying the groundwork for what sort of education the kids would be receiving in this course. Now, the email states that the students at this school in Buffalo would be taught the, quote, terminology for sexual orientation. Also, quote, it says, we will not be discussing people's own personal views, just informing the class of the correct terminology to use.
Oh, there we go. We go. You don't get to have an opinion on it. We will just be telling you the correct terminology.
It's not our personal view. Yeah. We're not indoctrinating you.
It's objectively the facts.
The facts that male and female are apparently
invented.
Not categories to use anymore. They say, we will show this video and talk about the terms used in the video. Now, this video is hyperlinked in the email, and this video that's hyperlinked is titled Bill Nye on Sexuality and Gender Spectrum. Now, Bill Nye the Science Guy is what he's known as, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, he's not really the science guy anymore, right, Moses?
Yeah.
I mean, in this video that was referenced, he goes on to talk about a lot of different things. He's talking about how sexuality is a spectrum. He states that some people are gay, some are bi, some are asexual, and some will take whatever they can get.
Ew.
Yeah, I know.
This is for kids?
Yeah, this is for kids, 10th graders. And then he refers to this as the sexy sliding scale. I'm sorry, but is this science, Moses?
Sliding into oblivion.
Is this science, Moses, or is this indoctrination?
Yeah.
That's what I want to know.
The latter, definitely.
And he's like wearing this bow tie and he's trying to be funny. You can tell he's trying to be catchy and trendy, and I just
it's like that
it's
clip.
ludicrous.
It's that clip. Jack, put it on that screen. That clip of that one actor whose name I forget, holding a skateboard and going into the high school and being like, "How do you do, fellow kids?"
How do you do, fellow kids?
Have you seen that?
No.
What actor is that?
Yeah, that's he was on SNL.
Yeah, it's not Paul Giamatti. It's How do you do, fellow kids? Who is that guy?
Steve Buscemi.
Steve Buscemi. Oh, that's such a great meme. It would have been so much better if I could have remembered his name. But yeah, it's like he's trying to be cool, trying to be
he's trying
hip.
to be trendy, and it really does backfire because in reality he's denying reality, he's denying science, and yet he's claiming to be a science educator. But in the video, again, he says a lot of different things, but one thing he says is that by 3 or 4 years old, most kids identify with a gender, and it doesn't always match the sex they were assigned with at birth. And then he says... it should be up to you to decide how you want to present yourselves to the world. And he calls on people, his audience, to listen to the science. And he says the science tells us that we're all on a spectrum. Oh, the science tells us that we're on the spectrum. Are you sure this isn't just your personal opinion getting in the way?
Yeah.
Right?
My goodness.
And then Bill goes on to say that sexuality is more complicated this way. Yeah, no duh, it's more complicated this way, but it's also more honest, he says, and interesting.
Okay.
Again, trying to be trendy. And so this video is hyperlinked in the email, and it is unclear, according to Alpha News, whether this video specifically will be played in the classroom or is specifically a part of the curriculum. But again, the assumption is that, well, this was giving an overview. This was included in the email. And it said, we'll show this video. The email said, we'll show this video and talk about the terms used in the video. So it's not clear if this is specifically part of the curriculum, but it is assumed that the school will be showing this video to the kids. So I think this we can at least say is a summary of what the class will be about, right? Which is going to be teaching 10th graders that apparently male or female isn't so clear cut. That's what he says in the video.
This is so funny to me because this is apparently like summer school kind of thing.
Yeah.
And I think what is more horrible than learning remedial algebra in a non-air conditioned room in the middle of a sunny June day? Oh yes, I can think of something worse. Learning about some people's weird ideas about sexual orientation and gender identity as taught by Bill Nye.
And they're promoting this as the facts, the science, right? It's not even like I have a problem with this because they're presenting it as the objective truth. They're not saying, well, this is an opinion some people have, right? Of course, they're not going to say that. Instead, they're saying this is completely unbiased, deadpan face, unbiased.
Right. They're not even saying some people think that that biological sex is determinative and that everyone has it and that you can't change it, while other people think it's a spectrum and can be changed. They're not even acknowledging that other people don't hold that view. Mm-hmm. As you've stated, I don't want to repeat you.
Yeah.
I just think that's so absurd.
It is absurd. And so some Minnesota parents reached out to Alpha News and they said that the show is less about science and it's more about force-feeding a flawed ideology over reality, which is absolutely true. I think, it's really pushing this narrative. It's pushing the sexual revolution on 10th graders and not teaching them the scientific truth, which is ultimately going to hurt them, right? It's ultimately going to hurt them to be taught that gender is a spectrum and to be taught that it's not so clear-cut as to say you're a male or you're a female, that there's actually a variety, that this is a sliding scale.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's happening here in Minnesota. That's basically what we wanted to tell you. It's happening here in Minnesota. It's happening in our public schools.
Yeah, that's so disappointing. Honestly, it sounds like amateur hour, and I'm laughing at that. Well, I'm also like angry that it's happening at all.
Yeah.
And on this show, we really want to talk about, and we do frequently talk about issues about education, issues affecting kids, because this is important. Kids are the future. I mean, we run a summer camp,
Yeah.
which is coming up in July. Go to leadminnesota.org if you have a high schooler who's interested in learning more.
Have it on the screen here and linked in the description.
And it's going to be amazing this year.
We'll both be there, right, Moses? Can
We
high five?
will.
I'm pumped.
Woo!
We're so excited. We're actually both speakers.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm pumped. So Moses, tell them what you're speaking on.
I'm talking about why grace can be safely ignored.
We should have that be some promo for this podcast because this is the story of my life.
Oh my gosh. That's not true. Grace is a wonderful host of this podcast.
Oh, okay.
So
that's it.
I was actually joking.
I thought you were gonna say some more good stuff about me.
Okay.
But-
All right. Itching ears, as they say.
I thought you were gonna be wonderful host.
Grace, you're also a good friend.
Oh, that's actually so nice.
Yeah, you are. And you're also just an amazing person.
Oh, well, thank you.
So-
Wow. Okay. I thought you were gonna talk about my.
Well, I felt bad making that joke, so then I had to redeem myself.
Wow. Okay.
But my topic is about just Christianity and politics, just how those two things can be safely mixed without becoming either this hyper-partisan freak or losing your faith. I guess those are the two alternatives that I want people to avoid. What are you talking about?
I will be talking about how teenagers can get involved in the fight for life, because it's one thing to know that you're pro-life. It's one thing to be passionate about life, but it's another thing getting plugged into your community here in Minnesota, knowing exactly where you can go, what you can do, how you can specifically make an impact, where your energy is best spent to help mothers, to help children, and to change our culture, to turn our culture from a culture of death into a culture of life. So I'm pumped for my topic.
That sounds great.
It's going to be great to connect with students. Ryan Baumberger is our keynote speaker, so he's going to be really emphasizing some key issues like life. He's going to be talking about critical race theory as well, and then I'm going to follow up and give students the tangible, specific ways in which they can fight for life in our state. And Moses is also going to be emphasizing just, again, how can you be a Christian but also be involved in politics? How can we mix those worlds, and how can we allow our worldview to impact the way that we go into culture? How can we allow our worldview to impact the politics, right? So I'm pumped. I think it's going to be so awesome.
It's going to be, I do think so. And we're really excited to be doing this after 2 years of not being able to do it because of COVID. It's going to be wonderful. So as I was saying, we focus a lot on education. We focus a lot on the next generation. And one thing that unfortunately really afflicts people in my generation and younger, pretty much anybody under 35 is probably the people who have been most hurt by this, and that's pornography, internet pornography. Of course, pornography has been around for a long time, but pornography accessible in the ways that it is accessible now on the internet, on your smartphone, essentially anytime you want it, and the profusion of it, the ways in which this we've talked a little bit on the show, I think, about how more and more violent types of pornography are becoming popular because it's almost like the old garden variety stuff just doesn't satisfy anymore. There's diminishing returns on that, and so people are looking for harder and harder stuff. And I hate talking about this. I hate being explicit about it. But we're the next segment of the podcast, we're going to be talking to our videographer, Jack. And Jack has released a video, an animated video that's essentially talking about the struggle that we face when we are looking to fight pornography and cling to the gospel, cling to purity. So that I think I watched the video and I was really struck by it. I thought this is so powerful. I think every parent should watch this. I think every young man and young woman should watch this.
It was very well done. Yeah.
So join us in a moment. We'll have Jack Bittner, our videographer, on to talk about that new project. You're back with the Family Beacon, and I'm here with Jack
Grace
Bittner. Grace, you've changed.
I have.
It's like the grandmother to wolf progression in Little Red Riding Hood.
Very much so, yes. I've been compared to a wolf before.
Yeah, well, but Grace is not a grandmother. This is getting
This
so
is a great
salty.
start.
We've been here for 30 seconds. So, Jack, you're here. You've been working for MFC for a year and a half now, I want to say, and you're doing great work with our podcast and with all the other videos that we're doing. But you're also a LEAD alumnus, and that's probably how you first got connected with Minnesota Family Council.
Yep. Met Grace and Moses at LEAD.
Oh, that's right. Yes. And then you also are almost graduated from the University of Northwestern. So tell us a little bit about this project, how you came to get involved, what's it called, and what's it about? What's trying to tell young men particularly?
Yes. So I'll just I'll put a little bit of a segment on the screen just so you can get kind of a flavor of the animation. Basically, the idea is it's inspired by the verse 1 Timothy 6:12, and that's fight the good fight of faith. And so I was reading that verse in a devotional, and I kind of conceptualized this image of kind of a knight fighting a dragon. It's super original. But I thought of that, and then I was listening to, when I was doing one of my workouts, I was listening to the Doom soundtrack, and it has this really driving industrial metal. And the whole theme of that game, which is inspired by Dante's Inferno, is about, I think, fighting a spiritual battle and fighting demons. And so I kind of mixed those two ideas, the 1 Timothy 6:12 and then the music. And I actually used that music in the animation. And I created this kind of metaphorical struggle of this guy he's going to his computer. He's going to type something in, but then he turns away. He looks back at his Bible. And so every time he turns back, he gets a strike on the dragon. But then every time he turns back to the computer, then the dragon gets him. And eventually, the dragon melts his armor, and he's lying there in the snow. And then you see in real life, he goes over to his Bible. He just like completely cuts off, the diction process, and he goes to his Bible, opens it, and then you see, spoiler alert, the Holy Spirit show up in the form of a dove, and then he gets inspired, and his sword glows blue, and it's really cool, and then he defeats the dragon.
It is very cool. I will say it sounds cool, but watching it, it's really effective, I thought.
Thank you.
At bringing across the message. So you're saying that when young men or anyone, older men, women are tempted, first of all, the Bible promises that temptation does not come beyond what we can bear.
That's right.
So
yep.
that's
Under
important
Christ.
to bear in mind. Yep. And then you're saying 1 Timothy says that we can trust in Christ, that we can have not just hope but confidence to fight and win these battles.
Mm-hmm. Yes. God will give us the Holy Spirit to win these battles. And so that is a great blessing as a Christian, is that God can sanctify us and he can enable us to overcome sin. And so it's not just something that we can, it's not easy to overcome an addiction of any kind, but it is possible in Christ. And so that's something I really wanted to get across, and that's why I used explicitly Christian imagery in it. There's a lot of anti-porn movements that are secular, but I don't find them quite as compelling because there's no higher purpose to strive for. I mean, there are. I am glad to see these movements popping up. Unfortunately, some of them have rather vulgar titles, but they are. It is good that men are starting to wake up. I in one of the promos that I posted on YouTube, I referenced a Psychology Today article that cited that 90% of males view pornography with some amount of regularity. And that is just horrifying to me. And that's in the U.S. Now, I don't have the data in front of me, but I think that was as of 2020 or like the end of it. And I imagine it skyrocketed during the pandemic. Unfortunately, that was one of the casualties of all the lockdowns and things like that. But really, it's really terrible how prevalent it is in our society. And so this is something I'm very passionate about. Yeah.
I think, there's a book about it called Every Man's Battle. You've heard of that one?
I've heard of that.
And I don't think that people can really generally get to adulthood in our day and age without being exposed to it.
It's really sad.
And so the question is, and that's horrifying to think. So the question then is, it's not if I can speak to parents for a moment, since I am one, it's not about whether your kid will ever be exposed to this. You can do everything that you can try to do to make your computers and your devices and your phones safe, and I'm doing all of those things. And my kids are pretty young yet, but the point is that you actually need to just let go, because in a sense, because you cannot prevent them from seeing something, and you can't prevent them from being curious. Kids are curious. But what you can do, I hope and pray to God that my wife and I can do this, is that you can train your children so that they know what to do when they are exposed to something that they know they shouldn't see, and that instead of seeking that thing out again, instead of spiraling into a thing where that becomes part of your sexual expression, which unfortunately it is for so many people, old and young. And we know that not only, as you said, not only are 90% of men potentially in this country using porn with some amount of regularity, but pornography use has become so habitual for some men that erectile dysfunction becomes a real issue. So that when they're actually in a serious relationship with an actual real life woman, they are unable to make things work. And that's just horrifying to me.
It's not God's design.
No.
And that's something you hit on a really interesting point, how it's not a question of whether you can prevent your child from being exposed. I mean, to be honest, I was exposed at age 11. So it'll get you, and it'll get you young. So, but fortunately, my father caught on, and he talked to me about it. And so I had, from a very early age, the understanding that this is something that is contrary to God's design. And he explained to me very much just why it's a problem. And because a lot of people don't get that talk. They don't see, it's just looking at stuff, it's not a big deal. But it is a big deal, and it does affect your soul. And it has like catastrophic implications, like you were talking about with the erectile dysfunction. It's not something men should be indulging in, because, I mean, like I said, there's secular reasons for it outside of Christianity, and I think those secular reasons point back to why Scripture is explicit on these things, that you shall not commit sexual immorality. And 1 Timothy, I think, is very I think it talks about sexual immorality, if I'm not mistaken, quite a bit.
Yeah, and I think the Greek word is porneia.
Mm-hmm.
We're not
right there.
We're not inventing this. The Bible actually says, "Don't look at porneia."
But bro, the Bible doesn't talk about that.
Oh my gosh,
dude, you should read the Message Bible.
Yeah, you seem really uptight.
Dude,
why don't you like pornography? It's so great.
Wasn't it Cenk Uyghur of the Young Turks who was like, just look at the porn. Just look at the porn. It's fine. It's no big deal.
I like that sounds more like Nicolas Cage in that one movie. But yes,
with the Wicker Man.
Yeah, it sounded like Nicolas Cage in the Wicker Man. Obscure reference.
Not the bees.
Send us a comment if you got that reference.
Yeah.
So, Jack, I here's a question for you. This is a video. It's aimed at younger guys. Mm-hmm. Let's say that they watch the video. They're watching this segment. What would you give them? What advice would you give them on taking the first steps out of this addiction? Or maybe they wouldn't even think they're addicted. Maybe they're just using once a month and they feel guilty when they do it, and then the cycle repeats, and they don't feel like it's that big of a deal, but they still feel guilty about it, that type of thing. What would you say to people in that type of situation?
Yes, I would say get an accountability partner immediately. That is the most powerful thing you can do. And if you read any guide, like I said, whether it be a Christian devotional or a secular article, they will say get an accountability partner, because it's a very private vice. And so if you can take away the privacy from it, and get a close friend, someone that you trust, and someone you can text and say, hey, I'm being tempted right now. You can make huge strides, and you'll be so proud of yourself, and God will be proud of you as well. So it's just that would be my number one
absolutely
a bit of advice to people who are maybe viewing my video and a regret or people are feeling convicted about their use of pornography.
I think that's really important, and that's something that I've had in my life, and it's been hugely important and helpful to me as well. I would say that at one time I was in a Bible study, a men's Bible study, and it was great. These things can sometimes be bad. If you're in a men's Bible study where you're open about these things and yet everyone is doing it every week, well, that's not going to be helpful.
No.
You need to have
goals, vision.
You need to have goals and a vision, and hopefully an accountability partner who is not as much in the thick of the struggle as you are.
Yeah,
they need
definitely.
to actually be able to say to you, Jack, Moses, you're better than this. I'm not struggling with this as much right now, and I can tell you it's so much better if you just cut this out of your life. So I would say that.
Definitely.
And I would also say that if you have a bunch of close male friends, but you're not talking about this with them, if they're Christian guys, then how close are you to them really? Because there could be this really dark, nasty part of their lives that you don't know about that maybe you could help them with. And maybe you could be their accountability partner if you're in a better place.
Yep.
So what's next for your project?
Well, so I'm recently working with another animator, coincidentally named Jackie or Jacqueline. So we might change Jackalope Studios. That's my animation company to maybe Jack and Jackie or something. That would be funny.
Sounds like a sitcom.
Yeah, it does sound like a sitcom. But so we are hoping to release a similar animation that talks about the feminine side, and it'll be very different in tone. It won't be quite as aggressive and testosterone filled as the Doom soundtrack. Oh, I'm gonna slay that dragon with a lightsaber.
I love it. I love the Doom soundtrack. It was so good.
Thank you.
I loved it too.
Grace loved it as well. Thank
That's
you, Grace.
good.
I
That's
appreciate
good.
it. So that's something we're working on. I'm also just to plug my my other stuff. I'm working on a cartoon series called The Radioactive Analog Memories, which talks about a guy who wakes up in a new Soviet Union and he has no memories, and so he's trying to piece that back together. It's kind of an 80s themed show. And then there's also this
sounds cool.
There's also There's also a comedy show that's very short episodes, like a minute each. But it's kind of like a mockumentary that takes place in a fast food setting called Fried and True. Except it's a cartoon. So
okay,
so
I like
I've
the
got some
title.
of my old buddies from a fast food restaurant that I used to work at. They all do the voices and they can help with the writing. So it's a good time. So
Thank you for making the video, Jack.
yeah, thank you.
Oh no, you're supposed to say my pleasure.
Oh.
Because that would have revealed what fast food
He
restaurant
exposed
you used
me.
to work at.
Well, you know what? I'm kind of when you work there, they really drill it into your head, and so I've just been kind of unconditioning myself over the past few months.
Because
And-
you're no longer a Chick-fil-A head
Yes,
or
and
whatever they call Chick-fil-A
And I don't want to walk
employees.
into McDonald's and then they give me my food and I say my pleasure, and then I go, oh. It's just not a habit I want to keep up, even though it's polite.
Right. You've moved on. You're doing you're almost out of college and you're doing really cool things like
Thank
this
you.
video and
working here.
With
These amazing people. Shout out to Grace in the
I'm
back,
flattered.
who's not on camera right now.
I'm honestly, we're gonna share this. I hope that many people watch this. It's a great video, and I'm so grateful, Jack, that you're in front of the camera telling us about it. So thanks so much.
I'm actually here. I'm usually behind the camera.
All right, now back to our regular programming on the Family Beacon.
Well, always really great to have Jack on the podcast. Love hearing what he had to say from the back corner over there. Moses kicked me off. It's fine. I'm fine. But no, I love having Jack on the podcast.
I didn't kick you off. You voluntarily got up.
It was a better conversation for them to have together, I feel like. But it was great.
So, one thing I really want to tell people about before we close this episode is an upcoming rally, and it's we're calling it the Decision Day Rally.
Dobbs Decision
The
Day.
Dobbs Decision Day Rally, and this is actually organized by Pro-Life Action Ministries, but we're also involved in promoting it. And I have to tell you that one of the speakers there is a very cool person, your very own Grace Evans.
Thank you, Moses. I'm honestly so excited.
You
Thank
should do the
Thank you.
vuvuzela thing there.
No, I'm so excited.
It's going to be awesome because there's going to be out of all the pro-life people in Minnesota, Grace has been chosen to talk along with a few others about the pro-life future in Minnesota. And now we can't tell you when that rally is going to be, but we can say that it will be the day after.
The day of.
The day the very day.
The day
that we get the Dobbs v. Jackson decision.
So it could be any Monday over the next 4 Mondays, technically. It could be any of those Mondays. Whatever Monday it is, it'll be that same day at, what time was it at?
I think it's at 5 p.m.
5 p.m.? Okay.
Between the two of us, we have all the facts.
Clearly, get the facts so that you can see it for truth, right? We'll have it in the description.
Yes,
yep.
and we've been promoting this in the wrap if you get our emails, and it'll be at the Warren Burger Courthouse in St. Paul.
But I'm pumped. There's going to be lots of pro-life activists there.
Yeah.
It'll be so good to connect with everyone, so make sure you show up, show your support for the preborn. It is a historical moment. It truly is. I mean, we're going to look back on this day, and we're going to tell our grandkids. I was writing this into my speech the other day, actually. We're going to tell our grandkids, America was not always a country that valued life from conception. It was not always a country where every child was seen as worthy of life and worthy of our protection and our love. Mm-hmm. But now you're so blessed to live in a country where that's the case. But we're going to be telling our grandchildren that. I just know it.
People are gonna say, I saw Grace B. Anthony give a speech when I was younger.
Grace E. Evans?
Yeah.
Oh.
No, but like Susan B. Anthony.
Oh, thank you. But you changed my initials. You're like Grace B. Anthony.
Yeah, because I was comparing you to Susan B. Anthony. It's a compliment.
Thank you, Moses. I'm thrilled. Thank you. It is a privilege to be able to speak on behalf of MFC at that event. It'll be wonderful. It's
going to be awesome. I don't think I've heard anyone, honestly, seriously, I don't think I've heard anyone speak on this issue as passionately as you do, especially to connect with people who are apathetic on this issue. I think that is your special gift, to get people off the fences, pro-life people.
Thank you so much.
Get them involved in the battle. So I think Grace does that better than anyone I know. This has been the Family Beacon from Minnesota Family Council with Grace Evans. I'm Moses Brattrud. We are so grateful, as always, that you tune in. Leave a 5-star review if you enjoy this content. Subscribe if you're on YouTube, and click the bell icon so that you get a notification every week when we post a new episode. Thank you so much for watching.
Thanks for listening to or watching this episode of the Family Beacon podcast from Minnesota Family Council. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts so you're up to date on life, family, and religious freedom. You can follow us on Instagram at MN Family Council and subscribe to us on YouTube to watch our content. Get the facts, stand for truth.